And this is a Fox News alert. The FBI releasing hundreds of pages of documents on the wiretapping of Carter Page during the 2016 election. The heavily redacted documents accuse the former Trump campaign advisor of, quote, collaborating and conspiring with the Russian government. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new hour inside America's news headquarters. I'm Arthel Neville.
Hey, Arthel.
Hey, Mike.
And I'm Mike Emanuel, in for Eric Shawn. The document dump reportedly the first time the government has publicly released requests to spy on an American citizen under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. The documents also show the unverified Steele dossier was a major component of the surveillance warrant. Democrats say they also show the FBI was justified in its actions. President Trump and his Republican allies claiming the Bureau overreached.
There is a serious problem with the FBI presenting to the FISA court an application for a search warrant against a United States citizen, and then followed by 3 renewals when they were basing it on a very flawed document, the so-called Steele dossier, that has never been verified.
Jillian Turner has the latest from Washington. Jillian?
Good afternoon, Mike. The FBI has released that now infamous FISA warrant that gave the intelligence community authority in October 2016 to former Trump campaign official Carter Page. Here's the motivation for that FISA warrant application from the FBI. It reads in part, quote, "This FBI believes that Page has been collaborating and conspiring with the Russian government. There's probable cause that such activities involve or are about to involve violations of the criminal statutes of the United States." The warrant's been released in response to a Judicial Watch Freedom of Information Act request, and it set off a firestorm here in Washington, from the White House to the halls of Capitol Hill. Page himself is sticking by his original claim that his campaign activities were just business as usual.
No, I've never been an agent of the foreign power by any stretch of the imagination. You know, I may have, back in the G20 when they were getting ready to do that in St. Petersburg, I might have participated in a few meetings that a lot of people, including people from the Obama administration, were sitting on in Geneva, Paris, etc.
The heavily redacted 412 pages admit the Steele dossier, the most contentious and controversial element, was a component of that 2016 FISA warrant. Chairman Goodlatte telling Sunday Morning Futures that this release should put all conspiracy theories to rest.
Most of the information that is redacted in that report should easily be seen by the American people. They can judge for themselves, but I will tell you it does not support the issuance of a warrant against Mr. Page.
Senator Rubio offered an even-handed assessment this morning. He said that while he doesn't believe this new information proves, quote, anything about collusion, it also doesn't prove that the intelligence community was spying on the Trump campaign. Mike?
Jillian Turner leading us off live from Washington. Jillian, many thanks. Arthel?
And Mike, the president sharing his thoughts on this from his weekend getaway in New Jersey, tweeting that the newly released documents show the Mueller investigation is a witch hunt, while also continuing to defend his, quote, great meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Laura Ingle is following all of this from Berkeley Heights, New Jersey. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Arthel. Well, President Trump tweeting on a variety of topics today, most recently this afternoon, blasting the Department of Justice as he maintains those FISA documents that were released yesterday prove his campaign was spied on. One of his tweets today, which reads in part this: as usual, they are ridiculously heavily redacted, but confirm with little doubt that the Department of Justice and FBI misled the courts. Witch hunt, rigged, a scam, exclamation point. Another tweet reads, looking more and more like the Trump campaign for president was illegally being spied on, surveillance in quotes, for the political gain of crooked Hillary Clinton and the DNC. Ask her how that worked out. She did better with crazy Bernie. Republicans must get tough now, an illegal scam. Now, all of this is coming on top of the week-long criticism from both sides of the aisle on how President Trump handled the summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday. One of the main issues, how President Trump appeared to accept President Putin's denial that Russia interfered in the 2016 U.S. presidential election, sidestepping the conclusion of America's own intelligence agencies that Russia did. Former Trump Homeland Security Advisor Tom Bossert and top White House Intelligence Committee representative and Democrat Adam Schiff had differing views today if President Trump has been compromised by Russia. This on ABC This Week.
It's an easy, cheap shot to say the president's been compromised by the Russians. I think the Russians elected a former KGB agent, and he spends all of his time and their resources squandering it on penny-ante spy tactics to try to get into loser kind of lobbyist pockets and so forth. And this country elected a president that was a former businessman, and as a result, our economy is doing well, and we spend our time trying to have productive meetings with foreign leaders.
I certainly think he's acting like someone who's compromised, and it may very well be that he is compromised, or it may very well be that he believes that he's compromised.
And as you mentioned at the top, Mr. Trump sees it differently. It believes that he had a, quote, great meeting with Putin. Arthel?
Laura Ingle will take it back here. Thank you. Mike?
For more reaction on the FISA documents, let's bring in former DOJ prosecutor James Trusty. James, thanks for your time. Let's get to it. How unusual is it for a FISA application to be part of a Freedom of Information Act disclosure?
Incredibly unusual. I think it's probably the first time that it's ever happened. I'm certainly not aware of any other circumstances where a FISA warrant was subjected to FOIA. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is it's so heavily redacted that there's still going to be some questions. This is about a 412-page document, and even I read it in the course of about an hour, which tells you it's heavily redacted.
Reading between the black splotches. What do we learn about the Steele dossier in this document release?
Well, the Steele dossier is in there. There's mention of a confidential source which refers to Mr. Steele. There's kind of two things that are important from the FBI's perspective. One, that they basically say this is a reliable informant, that he has a track record of being reliable, and they stick with that. And secondly, that there's at least some question that they acknowledge early in the affidavits about the possibility that this is politically motivated retention, that in fact that the whole purpose of the dossier was to dig up dirt against the Trump campaign. So they don't lay it out in vivid technicolor for all to see, but there's at least a disclosure, and of course that would be a huge disaster if they tried to mislead the court by not even acknowledging any possible political motivation for the gathering of the information.
What about Carter Page? On Fox News Sunday, House Oversight Chairman Trey Gowdy described him as more Inspector Gadget than James Bond. Do you agree?
Yeah, I don't know about that exact metaphor. I mean, the bottom line is this is a document that only requires probable cause. We're not talking about anything remotely approaching proof beyond a reasonable doubt. There's information in the affidavit that I think could probably satisfy a judge that it's allowable for the FBI to go up on a wiretap. But the problem is most of the information we really care about for that analysis is still redacted. And so we're left with the idea that, okay, there's mention of the dossier. There's, I think, a little bit of a troubling reliance on media reports as opposed to firsthand information. But there's really not any conclusive information we can reach as to what fueled the renewal of these applications, because it looks like there's probably ongoing new information that went into affidavits 2, 3, and 4 that we just can't see.
Should Americans be alarmed when, as critics note, political opposition research that may be unvetted is presented to a court and used to spy on an American?
Well, I think it's certainly a highly suspect area. Whenever there's going to be political motivation, the FBI has to be very tough on their internal procedures. They have to pursue the right procedures to make sure that if they're going to go down that road, they're not being used for political purposes. I used to see this firsthand, and they were pretty cognizant of the issue. But it's certainly fair to ask questions about it, and there's still going to be questions after today's disclosure.
What do you see as remaining issues following this FISA application release?
Well, I think there's still going to be questions in terms of exactly when the FBI knew that Steele might be sitting on unreliable information. In a later affidavit, they acknowledged that he broke the rules. I think there's a continuing question and concern about politics affecting FBI decision-making, and that goes back to Comey and McCabe and Strzok. But even Christopher Steele breaks his rules as an informant by going to the media because he's worried Hillary's campaign is being hurt.
Right.
So apparently the whole political motivation is contagious everywhere you turn, and I'd like to see the FBI get away from that and have leadership that doesn't operate that way.
In your view, was the FBI right to act on this information?
I would love to have a strong opinion, but there's too many redactions. I mean, there are so many black pages. It's hard to know what they had. And, for instance, if they rely on a media report that says the Ukraine was being denied weaponry because of these types of meetings, well, I'd like to know, is that an accurate media report? I know it's a shock that sometimes the media might be inaccurate, but that's the kind of stuff that we really need to know the bottom line on before we can have a legitimate or fully formed opinion about whether or not the FBI was dabbling in politics wrongly.
As a former DOJ prosecutor, you look at the pages with the redactions. Are you convinced all those redactions are legitimate, or might they be covering for embarrassing information?
Yeah, I hope they're not. I mean, look, it's absolutely unusual to even release this document at all, right. So I tend to think that's a good sign that they're willing to disclose things. But there are certainly other aspects of it where you wonder, why is the signing agent's name blocked out, but the judges are still on there? So they might be a little stingy. I know as an institution they tend to be a little protective or a little stingy. But again, the starting point here is a highly unusual disclosure that at least helps answer some of the questions that have been out there about how this thing got started.
James Trusty, thanks for your time and your analysis. Have a great day.
Sure, thanks, Mike.
Arthel?
And this is a Fox News alert. Police in Los Angeles identifying the man they say holed up inside a Trader Joe's during a deadly 3-hour standoff yesterday. Police say the suspect fatally shot a store manager before surrendering. Jeff Paul is live in LA's Silver Lake neighborhood with more. Jeff?
Well, Arthel, we're learning the name of the suspect is Gene Atkins. He's a 28-year-old man who right now faces a charge of murder. He's being held on a $2 million bail after investigators say he not only led police on a chase, but he held several shoppers here at this Trader Joe's hostage and ended up exchanging gunfire with police that left one person dead. Now, family are identifying the victim as 27-year-old Belida Corrado. She was a store manager here at Trader Joe's. Outside the grocery store today, employees brought flowers out from inside. They're also allowing people to bring their own bouquets, and they left out paper and pens where folks are writing messages of support to the victim's family and the rest of the staff. Now, police tell us this all started as a family dispute. They say the suspect first shot his grandmother and then another woman who he took with him as he drove off. There was then a chase with police where it ended with the suspect crashing near Trader Joe's. Investigators say after shots between the suspect and police were fired during a hostage situation. We just spoke with a security guard who normally works at the store but was off yesterday. Take a listen.
Since yesterday I heard this, I was wishing, God, why I was not here, my God. Whether Trader Joe's like it or not, I'm going to bring my gun and protect my family.
Now, Trader Joe's released a statement a short while ago that reads in part, yesterday marks the saddest day in Trader Joe's history as we mourn the loss of one of our own. Our thoughts are with her family and our crew members and customers who experienced this terrifying and unimaginable ordeal. Now, the victim's brother also tweeted out today thanking the community for its support, saying that he lost his baby sister, his world. We're also learning that the grandmother that the suspect allegedly shot was shot several times, underwent several surgeries, and is in critical condition. Arthel?
Jeff Paul, thank you.
Israel helps hundreds to escape from Syria overnight in an unprecedented operation. We're live in the region. Plus, a retired Major Air Force Major General weighs in on U.S.-Russia strategy after the Helsinki summit, the president inviting Vladimir Putin to the White House, and that whole wouldn't thing.
The president missed, I think, a really good opportunity to distinguish the United States from any other country, but especially from Russia. I'm glad he corrected it, but when you're the leader of the free world, every syllable matters.
Fox News alert, the Israeli military evacuating hundreds of Syrian rescue workers known as White Helmets in a first-of-its-kind mission at the request of the U.S. and its European allies. Connor Powell is live from our Jerusalem bureau with more. Hi, Connor.
Hi, Mike. Well, this effort was very much an international one. It was coordinated by the United Nations and ultimately carried out by the Israeli military. As we understand it, there were about 800 or so of these white helmet rescue workers and their families that were stranded along the Syrian-Israeli border for about the last month or so. due to the security situation, though, only about 400 or so were able to make it out last night. They were escorted by Israeli troops and UN troops into Israel onto buses, and then were taken over by bus into neighboring Jordan. According to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the U.S., Canada, Germany, and the United Nations asked Israel to help in this rescue effort. The White Helmets organization, which has been funded by the West, is very much part of the anti-Assad coalition in Syria, and they've been credited with saving tens of thousands of lives. The Assad government, however, in Russia view them as agents of a foreign power and also as terrorists, and they've routinely targeted them in both airstrikes and tried to push them out of Syrian rebel-controlled areas. Now, according to Western officials, Mike, now that these White Helmets and their families have made it to Jordan, they'll be there for several weeks and will ultimately resettled in places like Germany, the United Kingdom, and also Canada as well, Mike.
Connor Powell from our Jerusalem newsroom. Many thanks, Connor. Arthel?
Well, Mike, President Trump going on Twitter today touting his, quote, great meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin after their 2-hour closed-door one-on-one last week in Helsinki. President Trump now inviting President Putin for another meeting, this time at the White House in the fall. Foreign policy experts don't think this is a good idea. Even some Americans have their doubts. A new poll showing 50% of Americans disapprove of how the president handled the summit. Retired Air Force Major General Don Alston joins me now, also a commander of the U.S. Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Force. General, good to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you. In the wake of that summit, what is your assessment of the state of President Trump's foreign policy, and what's the global impact?
Well, certainly we can see that this week's been dominated by the domestic political fallout of this. And absent any particular content that could otherwise fill the vacuum, I think that I wouldn't presume there have been any changes in U.S. strategy when it comes to Russia. The administration published the strategy, the national security strategy back in December, followed by the national defense strategy. And in that, we clearly articulate that Russia has been subverting NATO. They are a strategic competitor of ours. We've watched them threaten from Sweden to Turkey, nations with nuclear weapons. They've insinuated themselves in the Middle East to be a pivotal player all the way through to Egypt. So, and we know what they've done in Crimea and Ukraine and in Georgia. So, I don't see anything that's really changed or is going to impact right now the change on U.S. strategy when it comes to Russia.
Well, considering national security concerns, what is the best way to handle Russia going forward?
Well, the NATO, if the NATO countries continue to evolve the alliance with the investments that the president has talked about, the alliance will get stronger. That's been the pivot point for Russia over these last 10 years or more. So Putin's been trying to drive a wedge between the nations of NATO. If NATO were to go away, no one would be more satisfied than Vladimir Putin. So NATO is vital to our strategy. A competent and strong NATO is vital to the strategy. But we've watched Putin 4 months ago promote his modernization of his nuclear weapons, exposing some new capabilities that are very interesting if they come to pass, and very destabilizing if they come to pass. So he's been very aggressive, threatening the nations and exposing his nuclear might. And so I haven't seen anything that's changed his behavior when it comes to NATO and his position with the West.
Is a round two with President Putin a good idea? If you think it is, how can the President Trump, get better results the second time around?
Nuclear nations talking to each other is better than nuclear nations not talking to each other. Now, the protocol of whether or not the two leaders get together or whether or not those lines of communications involve others at different levels, the flow of communication back and forth is vital and in the best interest of both nations. The concerns that a lot of folks have expressed is whether or not the aggressive actions that Putin has taken, annexing Crimea, and his continued work in Ukraine, and how he's stirring the pot in Syria and in the Middle East, those behaviors don't want to be rewarded in any particular way, and the rule of law needs to continue to be held up, and he needs to be exposed and held accountable for those things he's done.
Is a reward, General, though, a visit to the White House to be in the Oval Office with President Trump? Understanding your point that, of course, dialogue needs to continue between the two presidents, but to have it there in the White House, does that give Putin even more bragging rights?
Well, I think that what we need to have, if that's the way the president chooses to go, it's one thing to expose the trappings of the two leaders meeting and the consequences and the optics that would expose to everybody. But what would be more important and more forceful is the content that comes out of this. And so I think that you can't just look at the optics, as important though as they are, but really what really comes out of it. And there needs to be an accountability component to that kind of a meeting and a way forward for what we think this relationship needs to be and the behaviors that we expect Russia to begin to expose in order for us to build confidence that this relationship has a near-term productive path.
So do you feel that President Trump has to publicly admonish President Putin for his bad behavior thus far, and on all accounts, including his meddling into the 2016 presidential elections, and be very clear about that President Trump and his administration won't stand for it?
Well, frankly, I think there's a higher level of discussion that needs to occur. Those are important components that you've just mentioned. But I think that to talk at this level and for us to move forward with either future arms control or other high-level interactions that our countries are going to have and how we are going to affect other nations in the world, I think it needs to start at this higher strategy level. And I think those other parts are problematic.
And who is
but
involved
the
in that
conversation
higher
has to raise
level?
higher.
Who's involved in that?
Pardon me, I'm sorry?
I beg your pardon. Who's involved in that higher strategy level?
I think principally it is the United States and Russia.
But I mean, who
this
in particular, if it's not the presidents, who on the team, on those respective teams?
Well, I think that absolutely the President of the United States needs to be the one that is reinforcing what our strategy is and those elements of accountability that are important to make sure that we're on record and Russia's on notice that this is the unambiguous United States position and, frankly, the position of our allies. And so I think that grand leadership that is afforded the President, leadership opportunity afforded the President of the United States, absolutely, that's his responsibility, and no one can make that point more powerfully than the President of the United States. So I think if the dialogue is at the highest level, and that I think everything flows more naturally from that, as opposed to any individual component of that, which is, frankly, debatable and distracting if it doesn't fit into a higher context.
General Don Alston, thank you very much. We have to leave it there, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
New details on the search for a suspect in the fatal shooting of a heart doctor who once treated former President George H.W. Bush. Plus, as a rising Democratic star tours the Midwest with Bernie Sanders, could socialism be gaining traction in the heartland, or are Democrats at risk of alienating mainstream voters?
New York congressional candidate Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez hitting the trail in the heartland with Senator Bernie Sanders this weekend. The two self-proclaimed Democratic socialists working to boost Midwest Democrats amid concerns the party is drifting too far left for mainstream voters. Garrett Tinney has more now.
Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez are now two of the leading figures in the Democratic Socialist movement. And not only do they believe their agenda is in the mainstream, they believe it's a winning message in states that President Trump won. That is why the pair spent this weekend campaigning in Kansas and Missouri for candidates who support the socialist agenda. Medicare for all, free college tuition, and a guaranteed living wage for every person. Today on CBS, Ocasio-Cortez said she believes that platform is what helped her win in New York and is what is helping bring new voters to the Democratic Party.
I think that the factors that ultimately created our win was the fact that we had bold commitments, and I campaigned on hard commitments of Medicare for all, tuition-free public college, ensuring a Green New Deal for our future, and championing those issues were the reason that we won. We won across demographics.
This surge of energy in the left wing of the Democratic Party is causing some concern among party leaders, though, who are worried the socialist agenda could actually make it more difficult to win in in swing states. But at a rally in Kansas with Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez, congressional candidate James Thompson said he believes just the opposite.
So when people want to say that this is Trump country, I say hell no. I looked at what we've been doing in our district, and that doesn't work. If a centrist message would have worked, then Hillary Clinton would have won here in 2016.
Nationwide, the Democratic Socialists of America has endorsed 42 candidates running for office in 20 states, all in hopes of growing their influence here in Washington come November. Arthel?
Garrett Tenney will take it back here. Mike?
Arthel, for more on all this, let's bring in John Fund, columnist for National Review magazine. John, great to have you.
Thanks.
Senator Bob Menendez from the great state of New Jersey talked today on Fox News Sunday about the Dems' midterm strategy. I want to play this soundbite and get your reaction to it.
Ultimately making sure that we have an economy that works for everyone, not just the wealthiest, not just big corporations. Our agenda is making sure that we secure our nation, including our sacred right to vote, that it cannot be affected by countries like Russia outside of the world. Our agenda is making sure that every family goes to sleep at night knowing that they have the health care they need to keep their family healthy and secure.
So, John, your thoughts on that strategy for the midterms?
It's a soothing, vague, populist message. I think that since the Democrats are trying to boost turnout with anti-Trump voters, that would be the safest course. You know, bring out people against Trump and don't be too specific on what you would do. The problem is they've decided, many of them, that they're going to go the democratic socialism route. And that works in a lot of places. But Ocasio-Cortez's district voted 14% for Donald Trump. Right. That's not going to work in a lot of other places. The House is going to be controlled by the people who win 24 districts that voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016, but also elected a Republican congressman or woman.
Sure.
Those are not democratic socialist districts. They tend to be well-educated, well-off, and people who actually know what socialism means and know it doesn't work most of the time.
Democrats are also counting on young people turning out, and there's always a question every cycle, will they actually show up?
You know, lots of people have been waiting for the young vote to turn out. And in 2014, the last midterms, 23% of voters under the age of 30 turned out. 72% of seniors turned out. Every 2 or 4 years, we hear the young people are turning out, and they never do.
What about the fact that Democrats are playing defense in terms of 10 Senate seats in states that President Trump won?
Well, the Democrats have a chance of taking back the House because, again, those 24 districts have a lot of suburban soccer moms, people who don't like Donald Trump. They think his behavior is rocky and risky. But the Senate races are a different matter. They're going to be decided by 10 Democratic Senate seats in states that Trump carried.
Right.
So if Donald Trump's policies, maybe not the person, are still popular in those states, Democrats are going to lose some seats. So you've got a tale of two elections here. Different constituency you're appealing to win back the House, different constituency you have to appeal to gain seats in the Senate.
Where are the locations that Mitch McConnell should be worried about in terms of Senate Republicans?
Well, there are three very fast-growing states that are bringing in a lot of young people looking for economic opportunity, and those would be Nevada, Arizona, and Tennessee. Now, the problem in those states are, for younger voters, even though they don't vote in high numbers, we have seen a precipitous drop-off in Republican support among young female voters. Male voters under 30 still tilt slightly Republican. Female voters under 30, the Democratic margin is like 30, 35 points. It's a blowout. So this election may finally be the year of the woman, the young female voter woman.
Fascinating. How does President Trump's use of social media, Twitter specifically, play with young voters?
Mixed, but they just wonder if it's really presidential, and a lot of it is offensive. The president is the ultimate alpha male. So a lot of men understand where he's coming from. You know, he's the guy who enters the bar and he's bragging all the time. They may not like it, but they're used to it.
Right.
Women, he can remind a lot of women about a bad first date.
John Fund, pleasure picking your brain, sir.
Thank you.
Arthel?
Mike, thank you. Well, Houston police on the hunt for a gunman. They say he shot and killed a heart doctor who once treated former President George H.W. Bush. The doctor was riding his bicycle through a city medical center Friday. Police say the suspect was also on a bike. Brian Yennis has more now. Brian?
Hi, Arthel. Well, Dr. Mark Houseknecht was riding his bike to work, as he always did, when just before 9 a.m. on Friday, a man on another bicycle rode past the doctor, turned and fired 2 shots, killing Dr. Houseknecht, the 65-year-old cardiologist, once treated former President George H.W. Bush. The murder happened in broad daylight at the Texas Medical Center. The Houston police chief said Saturday, quote, "This is a crime that doesn't make sense. We don't even have a motive yet. It's not clear whether this was a targeted or random shooting. This is the only sketch of the suspect, described by police as a clean-shaven white or Hispanic 30-year-old man, 5'10" with a slender build. He was wearing a gray warm-up jacket, khaki shorts, a tan baseball cap, and sunglasses. Police are asking the public for help. If anyone has any images or videos that could show the suspect fleeing the scene. Dr. Neil Kleinman worked with Dr. Houseknecht for more than 30 years. This morning on Fox and Friends, he spoke about his shock.
Emotionally, it's a very tough thing to deal with. I think we all experience that in the medical community. Who could have done this? How could this have happened? It's completely unnerving and very much baffling.
Dr. Houseknecht, who practiced for more than 40 years, treated Bush 41 for an irregular heartbeat in 2000 at Methodist Hospital in Houston. Following his murder, President Bush described him as a fantastic cardiologist and a good man. He sent prayers to the doctor's family during this difficult time as police search for Dr. Houseknecht's killer and a motive. Arthel?
So horrible. Brian Yennis, thank you, Brian.
Of course.
Authorities are searching for a University of Iowa student who was reported missing Wednesday after an evening jog. Molly Tibbetts was last seen in the town of Brooklyn, Iowa. She was dog-sitting there with her boyfriend. He says she went for a run around 10 o'clock and never came back. Tibbetts is described as 5 feet 2 inches tall with long brown hair and brown eyes. Anyone with information on her whereabouts is asked to call area code 641-623-5679. We pray for her safe return.
We surely do. We surely do. President Trump says he is ready to slap tariffs on $500 billion worth of Chinese imports. How would that impact our relationship with Beijing and your wallet? Plus, SpaceX launching a heavyweight communications satellite into orbit. Why this liftoff set a record, we'll tell you. Coming up next.
SpaceX launching the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket at Cape Canaveral this morning. It sent a heavyweight communications satellite into orbit. In fact, it's the heaviest commercial communications satellite ever built. It will help improve broadcast and internet services for global satellite operator Telesat. The rocket's booster, by the way, broke off 8.5 minutes after liftoff and landed successfully on a drone ship in the Atlantic called Of Course I Still Love You.
Well, President Trump says he is ready to slap tariffs on $500 billion worth of Chinese imports. That's roughly equal to the value of all Chinese goods imported into the U.S. last year. The president has already imposed duties on $34 billion in Chinese goods, saying he doesn't like China taking advantage of the U.S. in trade. Let's bring in now Fox News contributor Gary Kaltbaum, president of Kaltbaum Capital Management and an investment advisor. So, Gary, are these tariffs working?
All evidence in so far is nobody is laying down. Everybody is retaliating, and China just pegged their currency lower, which affects us, which affects them, us more in a negative way. So it's on. And the problem is the word uncertainty. All these companies, all these industries do not know what's next. They don't know how to plan. And so far, nothing going good.
And Gary, as you well know, a warning from the International Monetary Fund last week that escalating trade tensions are threatening to derail a global upswing. Do you agree with that?
100%. We can just take a little microcosm what's happening with farmers. The soybean farmers cannot plan for planting. They cannot plan for equipment. They cannot plan for futures contracts going forward. And when you're an industry and a business and you can't plan, you don't even know what's next. And, the headline in the Wall Street Journal this week was about autos that the auto dealers are now preparing for what's to come next if there's going to be auto tariffs. Why should they have to prepare? And that is a huge problem. Now they've got to prepare whether they're going to charge customers more, whether they're going to eat the difference. All in all, it ends up eating into profits, eating into the economy. Not a good thing going forward. Now, look, if all these countries come to the table and realize, hey, we better do something or else, then Trump wins, then everybody wins. But so far, all evidence in, nobody's, saying nice to Donald right now.
In what ways, Gary, can the tariffs help American businesses, manufacturers, farmers, consumers, and the economy?
I don't see it helping in any way, shape, or form. They never really have. Look, they have been used as tactics in the past, but all it does is increase costs, whether it's the consumer or business. And when you increase costs, economy slows, business slows. It's just simple economics 101. And I think, the president right now, he even mentioned it this week, well, since the markets are up really strong, we can basically get away with doing this. The question is, if he does this and the market drops a couple of thousand points, does he back away? Answer is, I don't know. All I know is, the way I look at it, he's taunting markets, taunting the economy. I hope I'm wrong. I hope what he's doing is right, but I don't think tariffs have really worked in the past at all.
China has a history of manipulating the value of their currency. So is that China's work around the tariffs?
Yeah, they do not, they're much smaller than us as far as imports, so they got to find other ways. They'll hold things up. They lower their currency, so it's cheaper for us to buy so that we could still go in and buy their stuff. But again, that's when you get into distortions. And, for 8 years, I really complained about Obama, about uncertainty on taxes, on regulations, rules, and mandates, and fees and fines. This puts uncertainty in the system. When I am a business and I can't prepare for the next week, and then maybe things change a week later, that is troublesome. And that's where my biggest worry. We can talk all the numbers and the minutia, but really uncertainty for business on what's next, and it's now becoming all kinds of businesses, all kinds of industries. And again, I worry that the president's going a little too far. I hope I'm wrong.
Well, how far can he go before those businesses that you referred to go knocking on the president's door, figuratively speaking, saying, hey, Mr. President, this is not working for us?
Well, some business already have. Somebody like Harley Davidson already said it's going to cost us an extra $100 billion, and right now we're going to eat it, but we're also going to move some of our businesses into other areas of the globe, again, affecting jobs here. So it's already done that trick. He believes, the president, that this is the best tactic against what he believes has been unfair trade practices. And I must say, he's right. China has been a bad player for a long time. I believe he's wrong on somebody in Canada. But I think there's a better way to do it. He calls himself the great negotiator. I think you get people in a room and you discuss it, and not just use the strong arm, but he wants the strong arm, and he's running the show.
But he's saying the discussions didn't work before.
I don't think they've actually sat down at the table in a very big way and really gone over this in a very big way. I think there's been more harsh rhetoric out there, and again, I think he's using this as a tactic, and I hope it works.
Gary Kulpbaum, thank you very much.
Thank you.
After record rainfall in Washington, D.C., another round of wet weather forecast for parts of our nation. Next, where it's going to hit the hardest. Swamping the nation's capital as storms continue to slam parts of the East Coast. Take a look. My family and dear friends are over it, and it may not stop anytime soon. Let's bring in AccuWeather meteorologist Paul Williams. What's the forecast for the East and for the rest of the nation, Paul?
Did I hear you say that your family and friends are over it by now? Is that what I heard you say?
Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, they've got some more stuff to get over, so we might as well just prepare for our meteorological therapist. Here we go, okay? The rain, unfortunately, is going to continue throughout the entire East Coast, and I wish I could say you're going to get a break by midweek, but spoiler alert, no. So, unfortunately, we're looking for widespread scattered showers to reach up from Montreal to New York down towards D.C. Now, this is also going to become problematic for the folks in the Ohio Valley region. In addition to that, not only is the Northeast sick of the rain, the Southeast is sick of the rain, but we're looking at widespread rain showers in Raleigh to Atlanta, throughout Jacksonville to to Florida, throughout Pensacola, all the way down towards Miami. And then we have at least this strip of rain that's going to kick off for us in the middle of the country. Now, less humid behind it, but Minneapolis, Omaha, look for strong storms that's going to be closely associated with this cold front as it slices through the center part of the country. By the way, one quick note in Denver, brace for major travel delays there. And there's the flip side to this coin, the folks who would love to have this rain that some of us are not so thrilled about. Stifling heat just continues to just hold on and just refuses to let go of Texas, but not as hot in Oklahoma City, so there's a little bit better news there. For the Southwest, it stays dry as well.
Meteorologist Paul Williams, I like you even if I don't like your forecast. Thank you, sir. Arthel?
I agree with that. I love that, Paul Williams. Okay, a brave little girl's wish comes true with the help of some mermaids. That's up next.